I'm Redmond Bacon, and this is Cinemascapes. Prologue. If, like me, you suddenly find yourself with oodles of time, you may be setting yourself a cultural challenge. Is it time to finally watch The Sopranos? Or dive deep into a book that's been collecting dust on your shelf for months? For cinephiles especially, it offers a chance to dive deep into a new director entirely. I, for one, have plunged further into the work of perhaps my favourite director, the incomparable Éric Rohmer, and have found that he is perfectly suited for the current moment. Living as we are in self-isolation, away from any human contact apart from perhaps that of our partner or flatmate, Rohmer's films offer both an investigation into the nature of such themes and a balm, a chance for reflection and opportunity as the world outside us rages. Containing the capacity to calm us down and to reorient our space in the world, which is a blaze of constant 24/7 news updates, the films of Rohmer also offer intense intellectual exercises and are able to make us reconsider our own relation to isolation. But let's back up a bit and think, why am I picking Rohmer? Well, the editor of Cahiers du Cinéma between 1957 to 1963, he is an intensely literary director, preferring dialogue over action, narration over overtly showing, and long takes over quick montage. He is everything that a film school professor might tell you not to be, or evidencing styles that you might not want to do as a filmmaker. But actually for Rohmer, these are his strengths, making for a remarkably consistent and successful career, and establishing him as the godfather of humanist cinema. Part 1. Ordinary Humanism. Éric Rohmer is one of the progenitors of the New Wave, who, unlike Godard or Truffaut, constantly refined his style over the years as opposed to switching things up entirely. As a result, he has one of the most steady and rewarding filmographies of all time. He is a great humanist filmmaker, like Ozu before him, or Hong Sang-soo, Woody Allen, or Mia Hansen-Løve after him. He takes the stuff of everyday life and uses it to create poetry regarding the human condition. I simply cannot think of a better director to engage with when it comes to recalibrating to the new reality of indefinite isolation. While the ways of the French, their laissez-faire attitude to cheating, long lunches, sunshiny days, and intellectual verbalizations, they may feel very foreign, the feelings of their characters are definitely universal. They fall in love, they talk, they consider possibilities. Then the films move to a new reality or back to a strange, awkward status quo. For us, the ordinary, the downtrodden, the waiting for life to start again people, this very ordinary nature of Rohmer characters make them ripe for identification. With a few notable exceptions, there are rarely any heroes among his middle-class cinematic universe. These people work in ostensibly uninteresting professions: civil servants, magazine editors, lawyers, waiters, and waitresses. They carry themselves like normal people, and their conflicts are often situated within the context of the everyday. Like Balzac and his Comédie Humaine, Rohmer charts 50 years of ordinary French life with his vast filmography, making him perhaps the Gallic nation's most important cultural resource of the 20th century. He's obsessed with showing people going to and from work. Take Love in the Afternoon, for example. Starting with something as simple as the commute, with its characters discussing via voiceover its potential for fantasy and concentration on literature, it can help one replicate the normalcy of everyday life. The lawyer Frederick is a pretty normal guy. As a friend reminds him, "You think you are special, but there are thousands like you." It reminds us that our struggle in quarantine is ordinary, that we too are suffering like millions of others. But ordinary people are capable of extraordinary change. Rohmer's films revel in new situations that force characters to think in different ways, whether it's Chloe suddenly turning up one afternoon in Frederick's office in Love in the Afternoon, or the sudden reappearance of a long-lost love in A Winter's Tale, or the fact that a new town has been built on the outskirts of Paris in Boyfriends and Girlfriends, or the ménage à trois that springs up in the latter half of the tightly wound A Summer's Tale. Rohmer sees characters adjusting to new realities, reflecting on them, then using them for personal growth or to give in to new temptations. Part 2. Moral Tales. Rohmer's 6 moral tales, made between 1962 and 1972, all have the same premise. A happily married man is tempted by another before returning to the former woman. The fact he made 6 films on the same subject already shows his humanist instinct. Plots may repeat themselves, but psychology is as wide and deep as the ocean. The moral tales allow men to indulge in their fantasies, quite literally with the amulet-based charms of Love in the Afternoon, often without ever crossing the boundary into actually cheating. For those of us maybe stuck in quarantine with another, Rohmer shows us the fantasy of male desire for those in relationships without us needing to actually go anywhere. After all, for many people, the fantasy is enough. Perhaps it's also a chance to double down on loving your partner, or to think about getting a new one. Or, more banally, simply a chance to read, or even like the protagonist of La Collection News, if you're financially covered of course, to focus on doing absolutely nothing at all. For sexually interested yet isolating flatmates, it may come as a time for temptation to yield to someone you previously had no interest in. Whatever happens, it's a chance to observe life with a newfound interest, at different times of the day, for example, as all regular schedules have simply gone out of the window. As for true quarantine mood, you can't go wrong with A Night with Maud, which sees 2 people shackled up for a long night together. Sex is on the cards, but it is rather the possibility of sex that provides the film's interest, rather than the act itself. Any real eroticism, as Linklater later expounded in his incredible Rohmer-inspired Before trilogy, comes through the act of talking itself, being able to hold a long conversation over any and every subject, the prime act of any sexual being. It's especially true with regards to video dating, which is naturally more focused on conversation than body language, with one relying on their skill of conversation as opposed to mere physicality alone. Margaret Hinman once said in the Daily Telegraph, discussing Rohmer's work, "Sex is a byproduct. To Rohmer, the fascination is in the denial of sex, not in its indulgence." Perhaps this perspective adds a new point of view to your next video date. Part 3. The Power of Isolation. Post-Moral Tales, Rohmer explored with great intensity the limits of isolation and loneliness and the possibilities it brings for personal growth. His masterpiece of isolation has to be The Green Ray, a film about a recently broken up with woman who can no longer stand the busy streets of Paris. Played with pitch-perfect precision by Marie Riviere, Delphine can no longer figure out where she wants to go on holiday. She's invited to the beach, but she arrives and finds out she's the only singleton. Then she goes to the Alps and just leaves immediately. She is totally lost and adrift. The free time visited upon her more of a curse than a blessing. Yet somehow, when she is at the end of her tether, she meets a man in Biarritz. They leave together and choose to look at the sunset for the possibility of the green ray, a rare green flash at sunset that can reveal one's own thoughts and the thoughts of others. When it does actually appear, it's a simple, beautiful moment, perhaps one of the most beautiful in all cinema, a slice of magic that feels all the more deserving considering Delphine's extreme social isolation. Therefore, in the end, by resisting the stupid games that characterize single life, Delphine finds the possibility of transcendence. Her loneliness, her desire to avoid people, actually turns out for the better. Another great case in point is Magali in An Autumn Tale, a single mother/winemaker who enjoys the great landscapes of her vineyard and revels in her newfound loneliness after her children have flown the coop. She wants a man, of course, but she doesn't want to do anything to make it happen. She is much like a yearning, quarantined person, willing to find love, but unable to consummate it. Luckily for her, she has a couple of friends who can help, both trying to set her up with two very different men. While she states she doesn't mind being alone, one can see the yearning for connection behind the scenes, leading up to a great wedding sequence that reveals acres of emotion behind simple glances and ordinary exchanges. It ends simply, with the possibility of a date, but at least Magali has won on her own glorious terms. Likewise, A Summer's Tale explores the pain of isolation, only to slowly build up a moral conundrum where in fact you can have too much company. It starts with its protagonist holidaying in a new seaside town, sitting by himself in cafes, then sitting by himself by the beach, then back to cafes and the beach again. Rohmer takes his time to establish the character's central loneliness, who doesn't seem to mind it as much as a normal person might. It is this indifference that eventually sets him in good stead, as he attracts the interest of not one or two, but somehow 3 women. Then he has to choose. In my mind, this film is a great thriller, not through intense action, but simply through overburdening us with the complexity of choice. How easy it would be to simply have no choices at all. In the end, this is what the character does, choosing isolation once again to leave all 3 women behind instead of committing to a single one. It is a complete masterstroke by Rohmer, burning the bridges of his own construction by embracing real life instead of the machination of a stereotypical plot. For this young man, isolation is the only answer. Now, A Winter's Tale may be the most literal of all his isolation tales. It tells the story of a great love affair, shown in blistering intensity at the start of the film, love making on the beach and stuff like that, before showing a woman 5 years later thinking that the great love period of her life is finally over. Bouncing between 2 men, one is a hairdresser, the other is a librarian, in great normal Rohmer character tradition, she simply cannot commit, because neither man is the one she wants. Sadly for them, she would rather be alone than actually with these men. So luckily for her, her loneliness is rewarded with her long-lost love suddenly appearing on the bust when she least expects it. Like the end of The Green Ray, it is a charming, sublime moment, a work of magic that would fail in the hands of almost any other director, yet Rohmer is so sly, one cannot help but just smile. Part 4. A Blessing in Disguise. Rohmer indulges in coincidences, pieces of magic that edge his quiet tales into the sublime, and that turn isolation into a quiet blessing. After all, like the infamous ending of A Winter's Tale, it is often when we least expect it, showing that even if we are housebound, trapped within the 4 walls of our houses or apartments, magic could still strike at any moment. We simply have to be caught unawares. So in the end, isolation may seem like a curse, but perhaps it is a blessing in disguise, a chance to recalibrate and refocus on that which is really important. Like the hermit or the monk, we can use it to work on ourselves and our relationships with others. And if that fails, there is always the possibility to watch Rohmer film after Rohmer film and marvel at the infinite possibilities of human interaction. As for recommendations, I would start with A Night with Maud before moving to Love in the Afternoon to see 2 very different takes on the same moral conundrum, before observing the magic possibilities of the Green Ray's loneliness, then 3 of his tales of the 4 seasons, winter, summer, and autumn. Spring is good, but I don't think it's quite on the god tier of the others, or complements my theme quite as well. Message me if you have more suggestions on this further. I'm free to discuss Rohmer all day long.